So how come nothing new ever happens in our life? If the quantum law works, and we know that it does, then how come we keep having the same relationships or the same jobs or the same circumstances in our life? How come it's so routine and predictable that it seems that Newtonian physics is the law? Because we haven't mastered this idea called observation. So this one particular researcher says, well, who do I know that knows how to pay attention really well? So he gets on the phone, he calls the Dalai Lama. And he says, can you send me your 8 best guys? I want to study these guys, and I want to see what happens in their brain when they're focusing on a single-minded thing like compassion or divinity or unconditional love. Now, these guys, by the way, had over 40,000 hours of focused meditation. They spent over 40 years practicing. While you were laying on the beach, they were focusing on single-minded thoughts. And then they said, let's take a control group, just a group of people that are just average people, and we'll use the monks, and we'll teach them how to do this thing called focused concentration, what science is now called paying attention. By the way, the average human being loses their attention span 6 to 10 times a minute. That's why only a few subatomic particles actually pay attention to our mind. So he said, okay, we're going to hook these guys up to these brain scans, particular ones called EEGs. And EEGs measure electromagnetic frequency that the brain emits. And so they took 256 electrodes and they covered their whole entire head. Can you picture these monks, with the things? And then they ran all the feedback into a computer that created a holographic picture of the brain, and they were able to begin to measure brain activity. They said to these monks, be your normal self. They took 8 of them, be your normal self. And then they said, okay, now listen, you guys, pay attention to compassion. Just close your eyes and pay attention to compassion. The moment they did that, all of a sudden, frontal lobe lit up so much that the scientists had never seen that type of activity in that part of the brain. Now then they took the control group and they said, all right, you guys, pay attention to one thing. And of course, what happened? My back hurts. How long is this going to take? I don't really want to do this. Am I doing it right? I wonder what my kid's doing. I got to buy dinner, all that stuff. And guess what happened to their frontal lobe? Meh. Nothing. Nothing. Now, in one particular monk, there's a part of the frontal lobe on the left side, which is really the happy spot in the brain. And this guy's left frontal lobe was so ignited that the scientists said, this guy's got to be the happiest guy in the world. They'd never seen activity like this before. But then the scientists began to think about this, and what they said was, maybe paying attention and concentration and observation is a skill. Just like tennis or golf, and you can improve it if you keep practicing it. Now think about this. The brain is the instrument that we use. It's the machinery for us to process thought. How many people will accept that? And it also has some automatic processes that allow us to function. But for the most part, it's the greatest area in the body where there's the greatest number of neurons clustered together. And where you have the greatest number of neurons clustered together, you have the greatest intelligence. So the brain is the central clearinghouse of intelligence. Mind, by the way, is what the brain does. Mind is the brain in action. It's the brain at work. When we can measure a working brain, we're studying mind. So mind is when the brain is in action. So when we're using functional brain scans and we're studying how the brain works, we're studying this concept called mind. Then here's my question. If the brain is the instrument for intelligence or processing thought, and mind is what the brain does, if you can improve the way your brain works, who's doing the improving? And it's that nasty 13-letter word called consciousness. That's the only solution. Consciousness is our self-aware, free-willed individual that is really not the body, is not the brain, and is not the mind. As a matter of fact, consciousness is what manipulates the brain to produce mind. The brain processes 400 billion bits of information every second. But we're only aware of about 2,000 of those 400 billion bits of information. And you know what those 2,000 bits of information have to do with? 3 things, and only 3 things. The body, the environment, and time. That's it. You know, does your back hurt? Do you have a headache? Are you tired? Is it too cold in here? Is it too bright in here? Is it too dark in here? Do you like the way the person smells sitting next to you? Do you even like the person next to you? How long is this guy going to talk before we can break? And that's where all of our self-awareness is on. It's only on the body, the environment, and time. And yet billions of bits of information is being processed by the brain. Now, when we can take consciousness, self-awareness, and move it away from the body, the environment, and time, we no longer have to live by the laws of the body, the environment, and time. And when we're able to do that, we begin to open the door to walk into the quantum field. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. I don't want people to be intimidated because what science shows is factual, right? So they're more likely to believe in that. And the moment you use a word from some tradition or some religion or for some sect or culture, some people shut off. They have a stigma about it that really limits their participation because of their past experience, because of their beliefs. Most people live by the same feelings every single day. You know, people wake up in the morning and your brain is a record of the past, so you wake up and you start thinking about your problems, and your problems are connected to certain people and things at certain times and places. The moment you start activating those circuits of memories related to the past experience and the environment, you're thinking in the past. Because every person, every thing, every place has a neurological network in your brain because you've experienced it. The end product of an experience is an emotion. So when you start thinking about your problems, you start feeling the emotions associated with them. You start feeling unhappy. So your thoughts are the vocabulary of your brain. Your feelings are the vocabulary of your body. How you think and feel creates your state of being. So most people start their day, every single day, reaffirming their entire state of being in the familiar past. Then they rush to the predictable future, right?
And this is probably 99.99% of humans in the world wake up.
In doing that unconscious and habitually. So then they go through the same routine behaviors that they've been doing for the last 5 years. And their habitat is reinforcing their habits. And they're going through a series of unconscious choices, behaviors, experiences, and emotions. They do that for 10 years. They're on autopilot. And their body's dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past. And they've, in a sense, lost their free will to a program. I assert if you're not in the present moment, you're running a program. So if a person's living by guilt and they don't know it's guilt because it just feels like they've been feeling that way every single day or suffering, and those emotions are driving their thoughts, and if they can't think greater than how they feel, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past or thinking in the past. If you think you're a failure, you feel like a failure. Once you feel like a failure, you're thinking you're more of a failure. And people get caught in these loops.
Okay, when I'm stuck in my anger loop, I need to use another emotion to get myself out of that, not the analytical thinking.
Well, just ask yourself this question. Who is that anger hurting?
Me and everyone around me.
Yeah, so first your body, right? Because there's some toxicity in the long term. For short term, it's fine. But if you're caught in the rush of anger over and over again, well, you're down-regulating the gene, right? And if you're thinking about the problem, check this out. You're thinking about the problem and it's creating the response of anger. You're conditioning your body to become the mind of anger. In other words, conditioning just takes a thought or an image and a feeling or an emotion. So every time you do that, you're conditioning your body to become more dependent on anger. So what you have to do is you have to remember. That means then you would have to apply some type of exercise or some type of skill to stop, close your eyes, work on your breathing, elevate your emotional state. Remember the feelings of your future instead of the feelings of your past. In other words, if you're creating a wonderful future and you feel the emotions of that future and you feel like you're connected to the energy of your future, the moment you get angry and frustrated, you just disconnected from the energy of your future, and now you're back to the energy of your past, and don't expect anything to change. But that's okay. It's not a bad thing. We're human, right? But you take a moment and say, what's more important, this or my future? Okay, give me a minute. It's going to take me a little bit. It may take me an hour to pass the chemicals, but let's go. Okay. So people are starting to do that more and more, and the reality that they're perceiving is incidental now compared to what they're creating in their future. So they're reacting less to their environment and they're investing more of their attention and energy into a new future.
So it's all about that future, and yet most of us live our lives in the past, and everything is based on the past, and we're all triggered on these past pieces.
Sure, the best way to say it is, if you're not defined by a vision of the future, you're left with the memories of the past. And people literally believe in their past more than they believe in their future. That's why they talk about their past more than they talk about their future. People romance their past and more in love with their past than they are in love with the future. And people who actually create amazing things in their life, just were more in love with their future, and they kept it alive in their mind every day. And they, like feeding a plant or a garden, they're tending to that future every single day, and the delight that comes with it, and the excitement that comes with it, and the emotions that come with it, cause them to literally change their brain and body over time to begin to look like the future has already happened. Now think about that. If there's evidence in your brain and body by thought alone, evidence that looks like you've already experienced your future, what does that mean? It's already happened. So relax, because it's going to find you, and it's going to come in a way that you least expect. That's the beauty behind this. If you could have predicted, it's nothing new. It's got to surprise you. The brain learns by mistakes and surprises. So why not be surprised by an unknown coincidence or opportunity or synchronicity? And the moment you notice what you did inside of you that produced that effect outside of you, you're going to pay attention to what you did, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to believe less that you are the victim of your life. You know, someone or something is controlling your feelings and thoughts. So all of a sudden, realizing your feelings and thoughts begin to create an outcome in your life. I think that experience then causes a human being to feel empowered. They start to believe in themselves more. And I think when we believe in ourselves, I think we believe in possibility. And when we believe in possibilities, I think we really believe in ourselves. And getting people to that point, to realize that nobody's excluded from this. You can't tell me any longer that you're too old to do this. We have brain scans of people in their 80s that will blow your mind, and they could be watching.
Always focus on a future of yours. And by doing that, you can start healing yourself in all ways.
You can't tell me you're too sick to do this work. I've seen super sick people with 50 brain tumors turn their life around. They have no brain tumors, 50 brain tumors. You can't tell me that you had a turbulent past and you can't do this work. I've seen people that had the most abusive past that are the happiest people in the world. You can't even tell me that you'd never meditated before, because many times the people who have never meditated have the most profound experience because they're not expecting anything. You can't tell me you're too overweight, you're too underweight. You can't tell me any of that. You can't tell me you're too this or too that. I've seen it in all shapes, all sizes, all colors, all ages.
You mentioned the abusive past. And I would love it if we could talk a little bit about trauma today. When you see people go through trauma, Joe, do you see sometimes that some of that is passed through DNA, through culture, and then how do you end up? Because you must have a whole room full of people with different traumas, physical, emotional. How do you look at that phenomenon, and how do you get people talking about that?
The stronger the emotion that we feel from some external event in our life, the more altered we feel inside of us as a result of that condition outside of us, the more we pay attention to the cause, and the brain narrows its focus on whatever it is that's sitting there, and it freezes an image and it takes a snapshot. And that's called a memory. So the higher the emotional quotient, the more fear, the more pain, the more shock, the more anger, whatever it is, the more we pay attention to the cause. And so then we create long-term memories that way. Now the challenge is that every time we think about that trauma, we're producing the same chemistry in the brain and body as if it was happening again. So some people, after an event like that, are literally re-experiencing it 100 times in